Hello, we are fast approaching Booker Prize season for 2025. So I want to put out there my predictions for what we might see on the official long list when it is announced on July 29th. And of course, there are so many possibilities and options, but I think I've been quite restrained. I am limiting myself to 13 guesses because typically there are 13 novels on the long list. And what could be on the long list is any book of long-form fiction that is written in English and published in the UK and or Ireland in the past year, from the beginning of October 2024 to the end of September 2025. And I think it's quite key to remember that books published at the end of last year are options because, of course, last year's winner, Orbital by Samantha Harvey, was actually first published towards the end of 2023. And so when people were speculating about last year's long list, I think this kind of went under the radar because it just wasn't all that fresh in other people's minds. So the first books I want to talk about were actually published towards the end of last year, but are eligible. And first off, there's a very obvious choice and one that goes well with this gold top that I'm wearing, Our Evenings by Alan Hollinghurst. And this was published during October of last year, so it is eligible. And of course, he is a former winner of the prize, one of the most prominent novelists in the UK today. And this story is tremendous and great. And it was one of my favorite books that I read last year. It follows the life of a mixed race gay man in England throughout many years, traces him throughout his entire life, from his university days and his adversarial relationship with another privileged young man. He himself does not come from privileged circumstances, but he finds himself at this prominent private school of education where he develops a passion for acting, and it follows him throughout his career and his tumultuous relationships and his connection with his mother over a long period of time. And it is just the way it traces the course of a life in this way, I think is so beautiful and well observed, and how as we get older we almost become ghosts to our former lives, moving throughout spaces that we grew up in and are very familiar with and have specific memories connected with those places. I think it is so beautifully moving and tremendous and deserving even more praise. Juice by Tim Winton. And this is another novel that I feel like has gone slightly under the radar. It was also published in October of last year, but Tim Winton is a former shortlistee of the Booker Prize multiple times. And this story is really impactful as it's set in a kind of dystopian landscape and follows a man and a child who are in desperate circumstances. And the entire novel is his speech to a other man that he encounters and who he's trying to convince to let them take shelter with him. And it follows the story of his life and how the world got into this desperate plight, but also his own individual story and development, how he got caught up in this revolutionary movement. And so the way that this looks at our involvement in politics, to changes to the environment, to these large issues, but through a very personal and unique lens, I think is so fascinating. And even though it's quite a long book, it becomes increasingly gripping and nail-biting along the way. So I think it's a distinct possibility. It's always good to see some Aussie representation in the Booker long list as well. And also, another book that was published towards the end of last year and which is already being lauded is The Land in Winter by Andrew Miller. And of course, Miller is also a former Booker shortlistee, so it's in some ways quite an obvious choice. But This book I found really impactful as well, and just recently it won the Walter Scott Prize for historical fiction. So I think that increases its chances, but also this story is tremendously moving, although it's difficult to summarize. So it takes place over the winter of 1962 in an especially cold patch, and is set in a English village town, and follows two couples who are neighbors and who are quite different from each other, and it traces their individual stories and their connection with each other over this period of time as it gradually shifts and changes, and they develop and start to reassess their place in their lives and the larger world. And it has this subtle and haunting effect that's really stayed with me, and it is so gorgeously atmospheric in describing the landscape, but also the psychology and the positions of these unique individuals. Days of Light by Megan Hunter. And Hunter feels like an author who's been gaining real momentum. Her excellent debut novel, The End We Start From, was also made into a great film recently. And this story traces the life of a woman named Ivy from when she was a teenager on a particular day in 1938, and follows her on the same day of the year, but in the years going forward, and how she changes and develops over time, and develops this her own particular artistic connection with the world that is not necessarily to do with with writing or with painting, but through her own unique form of expression and engagement with the natural world and with spirituality. And it has such a subtle and moving effect to it. Also, this story and these characters are loosely inspired by the Bloomsbury Group, and I think quite often the booker likes books that sort of nod to literary history, and this definitely encompasses that. But Megan Hunter takes their stories and really makes them her own, and does something quite different and special with them. And the writing in this novel is just gorgeous. I loved it so much. Mothers and Sons by Adam Haslett. And Haslett is an American author who's got a lot of prize attention in the past. And this novel is so moving as it traces the relationship between an adult man named Peter and his mother Anne, and they have been estranged for many years, and it follows them as they reckon and reconcile with each other, which is a very difficult process, and how it gets into the messy emotions of their past, I think is so tremendous. And this story also engages a lot with modern politics because Peter, he's an asylum lawyer in New York City, and the way it follows a number of his cases, and exploring the whole legal process of someone seeking asylum, and the challenges of that, I think is so impactful. So I think it's a book that has a really good shot of making the list. The Language of Remembering by Patrick Holloway. And this novel follows a man who was born in Ireland, but who has lived in Brazil for many years, working there. And he married a woman there, and they have a child. But his family moves back to Ireland when his mother is struggling with Alzheimer's, and how he wants to forge a connection with her again, but which is very difficult because in her mental state, she often reverts to speaking Irish, which he doesn't speak himself. So it's about his process of trying to learn the language and form a new connection with her, and a connection with her past. But it also explores her life as a young woman who is pregnant, and who is living in a small town in Ireland, and so is subject to a lot of prejudice and expectations on her. And as an unmarried pregnant woman, the impact that this has upon her, and the way it moves back and forth between their stories, it builds up towards the end, that I think is So beautiful and powerful, and yeah, the ending of this book has really stayed with me. And also, it would be wonderful to see a book from a small independent press make the Booker Longlist as well. So I think this is one to watch for. The South by Tash Aw, who has been listed for the Booker Prize before, and I know it's always a controversial thing when a book in a series of books is nominated for a book prize, but this is the very first book in a planned 4 books. So maybe give it a nod for that reason. But also, this is a novel that I think is so excellent. It's set in a rural, struggling farm, and 2 factions of one family that come back together to try to revitalize this farm. And each member of this family are going through all of their own issues. But it is also about how 2 young men form this beautiful, romantic, erotic connection with each other, and tracing that relationship over a period of time. And again, this is another novel that is so atmospheric in its descriptions and language, but also in evoking the emotions of these characters at this particular place at a particular period of time. The Dream Hotel by Laila Lalami, and this novel was also longlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction earlier this year, and the way it portrays a near future in such a terrifying and realistic way, I think is so powerful. It follows a woman who returns to the US, and she is held by the authorities as a potential risk, and is put into a camp and is only meant to be there for a short amount of time, but her stay keeps getting extended and extended, and the way that her freedoms are instantly cut off and curtailed, and the way that people in her own life and in her own family start to question her potential guilt. It is terrifying, but also there's a slight sci-fi element to this story where her dreams are being recorded and monitored, and it's a program that she kind of partly entered into willfully because this is a new technology to allow people to sleep better, and who wouldn't embrace that chance, but how she is unknowingly giving up her freedoms and sense of privacy in ways that she didn't entirely understand until the impact of them becomes clear. And so I think this is a story whose message is so much bigger than just the individual story in this novel. It speaks so much to issues that we are facing at the present. And I don't think it's an absolutely perfectly written novel, but it is a really impactful one. Flesh by David Szalay, and this is an actual novel. A previous book of his, All That Man Is, when that was listed for the Booker Prize previously, it was slightly controversial that year because that book is really a book of short stories rather than a novel. But Flesh is a full novel following the life of a Hungarian man from his adolescence to his later years. And the way that this story describes his inner life and experience, but in a very stripped down and minimalist way, I think is so powerful and unique. And I've not come across much writing like this before, when the dialogue in it is so minimal. He has a very straightforward and simple way of approaching and interacting with the world, but I could feel all of the underlying emotions and simmering things going on beneath the surface of what was being said. And I think that is so artistic and powerful, how he conveys that, and the sense of just inhabiting a man's body and feeling this conflict between desires and how those desires are expressed. It's really unique. Audition by Katie Kitamura, and I read this book with my online book club recently. There were many competing opinions and different ideas about this novel because it's a story that really inspires different interpretations to it, because it's a book very much in 2 halves, and there is a shift and change in the book that completely makes the reader reassess how they think about the characters and their relationships to each other. So it begins with a woman who is an actress and she is unnamed, and she meets a young man in a restaurant, and their connection and relationship to each other is slightly uncertain, and where the story goes from there is so surprising and intriguing, and it had me pondering it so much. I found it equally fun and frustrating trying to figure out this book, and it was purposely written in a way that it could be interpreted so many different ways. But what this says about personality, the way we inhabit ourselves, what we project out into the world, how much we are manipulating the ways in which we are perceived, and the limited control that we have on how people interpret and understand or misunderstand us. I think it's so interesting. So definitely an interesting one to consider. Now, all of the books that I've talked about so far, I have read, so would wholeheartedly endorse them. And the final three that I want to predict, I haven't read yet, but I have very high expectations for. So first, there's a book that was published very recently, The Book of Records by Madeline Thien, and Madeline Thien was previously shortlisted for the prize for her novel Do Not Say We Have Nothing, which was actually the book that I was really rooting for to win that year. I think her writing is so powerful and impactful, and this story follows a man and his daughters as they are forced to leave their homeland and seek refuge somewhere else, and it follows them in a state of transition as they are on the sea, and they encounter a number of people from the historical past and their interactions with them, but also other people that they encounter in the present. It sounds very strange and unusual, but also is a unique way of looking at a lot of pressing issues that we're facing in the world today. And Thien, I think, is just a tremendous writer. So I'm really looking forward to this. The Girls Who Grew Big by Laila Mottley. And this novel is going to be published very soon here in the UK on July 10th. And Mottley was longlisted for her debut novel Nightcrawling, which was such an emotional and powerful book. And she's still such a young writer, but a very talented one. And this novel follows a young woman who becomes pregnant, and she's unmarried, and her family sent her away to have this baby and then give the baby up, or at least that is the intention of it. But when she moves to Florida, and she encounters a number of other young pregnant women or young mothers who have decided to keep their babies, and following her connection with them, but also her reckoning with her own situation and pregnancy. And this is such a unique point of view that I think hasn't been tackled in all that much fiction that much before. So sounds like a really impactful issue, but also the story itself. And I'm really looking forward to reading it soon, and I think it's a very likely candidate. And my final guess and pick is a big novel that if it is on the list, will be quite a controversial choice, only because it is not being published until towards the end of September, so won't be available for a while, but is also, I think, a very likely candidate. It is by former winner Kiran Desai, and the novel is The Loneliness of Sonia and Sunny. And this novel, it's, I think, 670 pages long, and it traces the connection and stories of these two individuals, Sonia, and who is a aspiring writer and novelist, and Sunny, who's a struggling journalist. And as they are living in America, their romance and friendship and connection with each other over a long period of time, and reckons with their Indian heritage, and it's meant to be an absolutely epic story, and I'm so eager to dive into it. I feel very lucky to have gotten this advanced copy of the book. But yeah, if it makes the list, I think it'll be quite controversial. But you know, if when books are listed before they are actually published, sometimes the publishers bring up the publication date, so that could very likely happen in the case of this novel. But who knows? Kiran Desai, as a former winner of the Booker Prize, seems like a very likely candidates. So we will see if any of these books end up making the official long list on July 29th. I will be very eager to see, have my fingers crossed for so many of these books, but I also really hope that there will be a lot of surprises on the official long list, because that is always a delightful thing. It's one of the reasons I love following book prizes, to discover books that I might not have come across otherwise and have them highlighted to me in this way. But I would love to know if you agree with my predictions, or if there are other books, because there are so many other choices that you are predicting might be on this year's Booker long list. Let me know about your own predictions in the comments below, and but also if I've perked your interest in any of these books, reading any of these books. I'd love to hear if you're keen to get to them, or what you think about them if you have read them. But I hope you're doing well and reading good things, and I look forward to a new Booker Prize season. Bye-bye.